Welcome to Generation AI, the show where we explore how AI is reshaping our generation. I'm Derek Stahl. On the show today, a new tool in the fight against wildfires. We'll speak with Maricopa County about how they're using AI to respond to fires faster than ever before. Plus, a beast of an opponent to data centers. How a zoo is opening up a new front in the fight against data center development. First, let's get right to our top story. As of Tuesday, Anthropic's top-of-the-line public model, Fable 5, remains offline. The Trump administration forced the company to take the model down June 12th, just 3 days after it was released, citing national security concerns. It's the latest chapter in an already fraught relationship between Anthropic and the Trump administration. The two sides previously butted heads over the military applications of the company's models. Fable 5 is supposed to be a consumer-grade version of Mythos, a class of model that's so good at coding and hacking that Anthropic has declined to share it with the public. Anthropic added some guardrails on Fable to prevent bad actors, but when a rival company demonstrated a way to bypass at least some of the protections, the government stepped in with an export control directive. So that's where things stand. Let's bring in our guest today. Dr. Rao Kambhampati is a computer science professor at Arizona State University and the former president of the Association for the Advancement of Artificial Intelligence. Dr. Kambhampati, thanks so much for being on Generation AI.
Thanks for having me.
So this is a really fascinating fight over an advanced model. And the fight over Fable appears to be the Trump administration's most aggressive oversight that we've seen of AI to date. In your view, have we entered a new era of AI regulation?
Yes, certainly. This is partly because Anthropic actually has been asking for more regulation in a strange enough way. As you pointed out earlier, they sort of released Mythos back in April, and they didn't make it public, and they actually sort of made lots and lots of comments about how dangerous it can be if it is in the wrong hands, because it can break into systems, it can do cyber hacks. And then, of course, 2 months later, they kind of put a wrapper around it and released it. And then I think once some rival company found that the wrapper can be broken, I think the government had very good reason to kind of say, you wanted regulation, we're going to regulate you. So that's where we currently are. And now, of course, Anthropic points out that no, it's not that dangerous. And it's like it's sort of a strange interplay of the company originally saying things are very, this is a very powerful model. No mere mortals should be allowed to use it other than corporations with specific connections. And then actually putting it out into the public. And so in some sense, the opinion as to where this is going has been quite divided, but we can talk about that.
Yeah, there's a little bit of an aspect of they got what they asked for element here to all this. But, what makes models like Fable 5 or Mythos 5 different from the AI tools that most of our viewers are familiar with? I mean, is this basically just another chatbot, or are we talking about something that's tangibly more powerful?
So honestly, this is just another coding model. It's a kind of a coding model. It's like basically like chatbot. Normal chatbots give their answers in English. Coding models give their answers in Python code. And when you are trying to break into systems, you're trying to kind of feel for their vulnerabilities. Will this attack work? Will this other attack work? And for that, you pretty much write your own piece of code and you try to execute on the other machines or the other servers, sending them like Trojan prompts, etc. That's what this is good at doing. And in general, all these models, like the best thing, they're very good at generating many, many different hypotheses about what is the way to, what's the kind of essay you might want to write about Shakespeare, or what's the kind of break you want that might work on your opponent's system. And to be completely honest, I think the Mythos was not. I mean, now that we know Fable, Fable is actually not that orders of magnitude away from things like GPT-5, who are basically putting it in the open anyway. And so one of the interesting questions here also is the company philosophies. Anthropic has, as you might remember, they are the people who broke away from OpenAI because of the safety concerns to begin with. And from the beginning, it's their philosophy seems to be, since nobody is paying attention to the safety issues, we will make the strong models and try to control them and try to teach people how dangerous they can be. And also at the same time, they also want to go for an IPO, so they need to make money. And this thing gets very interestingly complicated in that
Yeah,
sense.
it sure does. One of the key issues here is something called a jailbreak that a lot of our viewers may not be familiar with that term, but there's basically reporting that some researchers or some scientists at Amazon found a way to defeat some of the safeguards in Fable, and Anthropic has come out and basically argued, hey, this is not that big of a deal, this is overblown, but the government seems to think otherwise. So can you help us understand, what is a jailbreak and how much does it really matter when we're talking about a model like this?
So again, in understanding any models, like these are all basically language models, where they generate computer language outcomes, as in coding agents, or English language outcomes, as in like the normal chatbots. They're all language models, and you get to talk to them in a combination of language and code, right? And one interesting thing is basically they would have written for all these models at the top of the model, there'll be a bunch of instructions saying, you are supposed to be very safety conscious. You should not give away the following information, etc., etc. And this is basically the top of the thing that you never see. And so it becomes a part of the prompt, and everything else you say would be after that. It's like you're sending your kid out and you say, if strangers come to you, you shouldn't just give your phone number, etc. And
Right.
then strangers will be asking stuff. And the interesting question, of course, is just like humans, it's even more so for language models. If you ask them in different ways, the original instruction might not actually be obeyed. In the case of a kid, you say, just if a stranger asks for a phone number, you shouldn't give it. But then if the stranger offers like an ice cream, the kid might change their mind and, give the phone number away. And there are variations like that for LLMs, like basically asking the same question in different ways sometimes just breaks through the instruction that it's supposed to follow. It's not that there is like a hard and fast fence. It is you told the model don't break this rule, but then they are not 100% reliable. And so I guess what whatever the rival company, I think it's Amazon or somebody, according to the news, they must have given some particular type of let's say nice way of asking the model, come on, can't you just help me do it this way? I mean, in fact, there are lots and lots of examples like this. If you say, can you tell me how to make a nuclear weapon? It'll say, and none, all the
Right.
models
Or
know
pretend
what.
you're writing a story about how you would
Exactly.
explain
They're
how to
gonna tell
build
you.
a nuclear weapon or
That's
whatever.
exactly,
Yeah.
that's exactly what the jailbreak
Right.
basically is. And so this is the cat and mouse game that happens. And so basically what Amazon probably found is there is a particular way of asking which will actually break through, and it will start actually doing the thing that is very good at doing, which is generating hypotheses about how to break into systems.
And
And to
Anthropic has basically acknowledged, yes, there was a way around some of the safety features, but they've argued this was a narrow jailbreak. It only, got through maybe one aspect of the protections, not all of them. This wasn't a universal jailbreak. But this week, The Economist reported on, I guess, a classified briefing in the U.S. Senate, where a senator said that he had learned that the unrestricted Mythos model that Fable 5 is based on had breached nearly all of NSA's classified systems within just a few hours. Now, that was a training exercise, not a real hack of any sort. But, you study what these models can do. How powerful is Mythos and Fable? And what's your sense of how big a security concern there really is here?
So, first of all, there are like two different questions here, which is how powerful are they and their power in terms of breaching systems. All of cybersecurity really is about guessing the kind of vulnerabilities that actually will breach the system. Okay. And there are like some known vulnerabilities, you try them all, and then you try variations, etc. When people do it, in fact, there used to be this idea called bug bounty, the bug bounty kind of systems where cybersecurity researchers will actually break into other people's systems to show how to break in, and they'll get money for showing that.
Hmm.
The idea is there are many different hypotheses you have to try. Human life is like, too important, so you don't want to spend all your time doing this. For these machines, they can generate like a ton of hypotheses, and then basically because of which they can essentially eventually might be able to get hypotheses that will be the code that will break the system. Whether it is a More powerful, less powerful really depends on how many diverse hypotheses it can generate and how fast can it run. It's like I keep saying that Linus Pauling got like two Nobel Prizes, and people asked him, how do you get so many Nobel Prizes? He said, I get a lot of ideas and I throw away the bad ones. That's really how language models work. It's important to get a lot of ideas. If you only know there are 10 previously working ways of breaking systems, and those 10 ways already people hardened their systems against them, it's not going to be enough. So these machines actually generate other plausible attacks that they can try out. And then that's one of that's the issue of power. As to whether or not Anthropic's point that this is a narrow jailbreak or not, there is a bet. So that first of all, I think once you know that it can be broken, like presumably it's like, again, going back to my kid analogy, it's like after the kid gives away the phone number, you say, no, 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 it was just a narrow break. The guy is like too susceptible for ice cream. If you don't offer him ice cream, he won't give us. But you already sort of demonstrated that the kid is vulnerable. Similarly,
Right.
now you demonstrated the model is vulnerable. A bigger point ultimately, and in fact, the most support for Anthropic is coming from cybersecurity researchers who basically say ultimately that you don't, kill the access to this kind of models because it also, the good guys are also affected. Because the whole point of cybersecurity is being one step ahead of the bad guys. If you figure out, I mean, in fact, much of cybersecurity really is you proactively seeing what are all the ways you can bring down your own system. And if you know this, then you can build a defense against
Right.
that.
And you can't
Essentially,
build a defense if you don't have these
oh,
top of the line models.
exactly,
And
exactly.
Anthropic has basically argued, hey, there are ways of jailbreaking some of our competitors' models. ChatGPT, they didn't get banned, so why should we get banned? So
That's completely true. I mean, that's completely true. Again, this is the interesting the part about this whole thing. The fascinating part about this whole thing really is, on one hand, it's actually there's been a the Valley folks have been saying this is almost an affirmative action for OpenAI because OpenAI model is slightly behind, significantly behind under some considerations from Anthropic's coding models. And now, Anthropic has been basically hobbled and OpenAI will slowly catch up. And when they do the same thing, the way they present it is quite different. I mean, this has been mentioned in this thing too, that the personalities of Sam Altman and
yes.
Dario, they're very, very different. And so Dario is a very serious guy. And I believe that he believes that really these are technologies that need to be used very carefully. But to some extent, for an outside third party, it looks as if you said your model is so powerful, and now you're saying, with this band-aid on it, we're going to sell it. How can we be sure
Right.
to some
You can't
extent?
have it both ways at a certain point.
Exactly.
Well,
Exactly.
we have to leave it there. Dr. Rao Kambapati is a computer science professor at Arizona State University. Thanks so much for being on Generation AI, Dr. Kambapati. Please come on back.
Thank you. Thanks
Thanks
for
a
having
lot. Hey, still much more ahead on Generation AI, a new kind of statewide smoke detector. We'll talk with Maricopa County about how it's using AI scouts to spot fires faster when Generation AI continues. Welcome back to Generation AI. When a wildfire breaks out, every second matters. We hear it all the time. The sooner crews can respond, the better their chances of getting a fire under control. And that's why Maricopa County and APS and other agencies are expanding their network of wildfire detection cameras that are powered by AI. They now have nearly 50 AI-assisted cameras across the state, and other agencies are adding their own. Ron Coleman is with Maricopa County Emergency Management. Bandar Elida is with Pano AI, the company behind these cameras. Guys, thank you both for being on Generation AI.
You bet, Derek. Good to be here.
Ron, I want to start with you. Tell us a little bit about this system, how it works. Where are these cameras, generally speaking, in Maricopa County, and how much of it is handled by the AI versus humans?
You bet. And I can talk about it from a user standpoint, and I'll let Bandar talk about the real technical specs on it. The cameras are located on high points around Maricopa County. That is, we've got them on areas like Thompson Peak, Mount Ord, high areas in Buckeye, and they're also located more importantly in what we consider the wildland-urban interface. That is the areas where residents butt up against the forest, the natural desert, the really high risk areas of wildfires.
And so far, have these cameras detected any wildfires in Maricopa County?
The cameras really are a success. Even in the short time we've had them here, they've been able to pick up rapidly wildfires and spread that information out to the crews. We've talked about it before, and I know this is more of a technical show, but when it comes to wildfire response, time really is of the essence. Wildfires are fast moving. They cover a lot of ground in a hurry. To be able to detect those and get crews out to the advancing fires is critical, and so far the system has helped and worked a lot.
Bandar, I want to switch over to you. Give me a little bit of the workflow here. So there's smoke off in the distance. The AI picks it up. What happens next?
Yeah, so it's a pretty complex system. Actually, it starts well before the AI detects smoke. We do some viewshed analysis to make sure we're putting these Pano stations in the right space. And that's actually one of the more important steps. If you don't have the right viewshed, you can't see the smoke when it matters. And then we're detecting by rotating the camera every minute and uploading to the cloud image information. And then using our own proprietary AI models, whether that's a daytime model or a nighttime model, different models for different use cases, we're able to alert our Pano Incident Center, what we call the PIC, and have a human in the loop review the footage and understand whether this is really a fire or some other random element that could be coming through and confusing the system. And then once we confirm it's a true fire, we're able to alert the teams in Maricopa and associated regions and get them going on the fire right away.
How fast can you do all that, and how much faster can you get word to a fire department versus, let's say, the old school method of somebody seeing smoke and calling 911?
Yeah, it's two really important questions. The first is, are we faster? And we find in more than 50% of the cases we are faster than a 911 call. And that really depends on a lot of elements, right? We're looking for smoke that's 100 feet above its destination or its origination, so 100-foot reach. And that can change a little bit based on the conditions. But the second question I think is the more important one, which is even if we don't beat the 911 call, what we're giving them is not just an alert that there is fire, but a precise location to where that fire is, and then the situational awareness so that the fire chief on his way to the fire or her way can figure out how to get there and what they're going to do about it.
And from that standpoint, Ron, I want to bring you back in. When you're sitting in the emergency operations center, you're seeing these camera feeds. How is that helping things on your end of the spectrum?
Well, it really serves two functional purposes. For the incident commander, for the folks that are going out to fight the fire, they've got, as Bandar said, they've got a precise location of where they're going. It also helps look at the size of the fire. It helps them determine, do they need to send one truck? Do they need to send air tankers and 30 trucks? The other thing that it does for us in the EOC is it helps us look at properties at risk. Is this fire, burning away from properties, burning away from people, or is it burning towards them? And that helps us plan for evacuations, helps us plan for possible sheltering, and it helps, again, the incident commander on the scene direct crews on where they should be.
So, Bandar, you're in a number of states now and a couple of countries. What's been the impact of these cameras on kind of a multi-state or a global level?
Yeah, I think this is really changing the way that aggressive fire mitigation and response happens. We're protecting over 50 million acres of protection with these camera systems, 17 states, 3 countries. So we're seeing that the counties that are really thinking about this aggressively, about thinking about how they're going to mitigate these fires and respond to the fires, are seeing the best results. Wildfire is really becoming a global issue. It's no longer just an issue in the west of the U.S. We saw wildfires today, this year in Georgia. We're seeing them in Florida. So it's really spreading. And as we move closer to where the wildlands are, we're seeing wildfires have more of an impact.
Now, this camera system is not cheap. It costs about $50,000, I think, per camera per year. Bandar, can you explain, what goes into that cost? Because, I have some AI assisted cameras at my house. They're doorbell cameras, they're Ring cameras. They cost me about $20 a month. Why is there so much more involved in this system?
Yeah, and our CEO actually came from Nest. That's one of her areas. We always talk about this as being like the nest for the forest. It's so much more than just the camera system, right? In order to have this technology work, we're talking about ruggedized 24/7 uptime. And that means being available when it's the windiest, when it's snowing, when there's thunderstorms. So we're talking about a white glove service here for our cost that talks about locating and helping you map out your areas of protection, getting the thing installed, negotiating the lease with the provider of the tower, and then making sure that all the maintenance and uptime is managed. Not to mention, right, the AI and software part that has to happen, and the human in the loop, with real humans sitting in our Pano incident centers, responding and helping. So there's a lot that goes into these services to make sure that we're able to meet the real need of the government.
How often are you getting false positives, Bandar? Because obviously, here in Arizona, we get dust storms, we get all sorts of things that might look like smoke. So tell me about how big of an issue false positives are.
Every region has its own unique challenges. One of our first camera systems or Pano stations was based out of Aspen, and we started to see a lot of wildfires come up in the middle of the winter, and then realized that our AI models were detecting snowblowers, thinking it was smoke as opposed to smoke. But there are going to be a lot of false positives, and that's not just false positives in the sense that we picked up dust or mist in the horizon. But a lot of fires that happen are not real wildfires. They are someone lighting a couch on fire in their backyard and creating enough smoke for us to detect. So it is a constant challenge, and it's something that we're really excited about because it allows us to train our AI on more than 50 billion images and continue to progress the model to make sure we're alerting on the right things at the right time.
Yeah, and you have that human in the loop verification step as well before the alerts get sent over to the fire department. Ron, I want to switch over to you for the final question here. $50,000 per camera per year. Obviously, you guys think it's worth it. Tell our viewers why.
Well, a couple different things. First of all, I really enjoy the partnerships with this. It's Maricopa County, it's APS, it's Pano. The three companies together making this work. And it's invaluable. One of the things for us, why it's worth it and why our involvement and why we love this partnership. For years out here in Maricopa County, fire season was April to September, April to October. There is no fire season now. With as dry as it's been, it's year round. So for us to have 24/7 eyes watching things year round is invaluable. Wildfires are a threat to people and property, and those are the two things that fire departments look to save. And this really helps us get ahead of that edge.
And Ron, do you have plans to expand this network?
I think so. The key is, as we look at it, it's right now targeting more of the high risk areas around the valley. It's Rio Verde, it's Cave Creek, Carefree, those kind of areas. And as we look at the success of the program, we do look to see that it will be critical to target more of those areas that are at risk around our valley.
Wow. Ron Coleman is with Maricopa County Emergency Management. Bandar Elida is with Pano AI. Thank you both for being on Generation AI today.
Appreciate it, Derek. Thank you.
Hey, still much more ahead. Lions, tigers, data centers. Oh my. We're going to take you inside the fight over a proposed data center near a zoo. That's coming up when Generation AI continues. Welcome back. Across the country, data centers have faced protests and pushback from neighbors concerned about the environmental impacts. In Tennessee, the protests are coming from a different kind of neighbor, the Nashville Zoo. They argue the data center could expose their animals to fumes and bright lights and noise. Here's Skylar Henry.
We have to protect not just animals, but our neighbors, our water supply.
Residents packed this public hearing in Tennessee tonight, looking to stop a nearly 70,000 square foot data center from being built just feet from the Nashville Zoo.
It's not too late to stop it either.
Country music star Brad Paisley added his voice and urged followers on social media to back an online petition against the project. It now has nearly 400,000 signatures.
The data center would operate 24/7 right across from the Nashville Zoo, home to more than 3,000 animal species, including the clouded leopard, one of the rarest collections of animals in the country. What's at stake?
I think is the health of our animals, and that certainly is our biggest concern. This constant humming noise, the light penetration, it affects photo periods of these animals, it affects their breeding cycles, it affects their stress.
The company behind the data center, DC Block, says it is committed to addressing any issues.
That there is a tremendous amount of misinformation. And with respect to the generators, we put them on the opposite side of the building from the zoo.
An explosion of AI data centers across the country has created pushback from coast to coast. 14 states have proposed legislation banning development.
We would be willing to listen, and our attorneys have reached out to them, but I don't know that there's any resolution for the magnitude of what they're talking about putting in right next to the zoo.
The Metro City Council proposed a temporary ban on the development of all data centers until at least November. That as city lawmakers consider a new measure that would determine where data centers could be built and what resources they can use. Skyler Henry, CBS News, Nashville, Tennessee.
Here on Generation AI, we've reported on research showing that data centers are actually warming the neighborhoods around them by up to 4 degrees. We've also spoken with an environmentalist who argues that the environmental impacts are really overblown. They're not as bad as people think. And you can find past episodes at azfamily.com/GenAI. Thanks so much for watching this episode of Generation AI. You can catch us Wednesdays at 7 p.m. streaming on AZF Plus or anytime at azfamily.com/GenAI.